I hope everybody had a good evening last night. What an incredible music concert. Let's hear it also for the musicians and for everything yesterday. And welcome back for day two. It was a great day one. I hope everybody's feeling energized and excited. Yesterday, as you know, our focus was primarily on equity, inclusion, and pluralism in early learning. Although across our different challenge sessions, we explored learning, equity, and inclusion across all of the age cohorts. And for me, what was really exciting was, even though it was a very diverse mix of speakers, of workshops, of challenge sessions, we had these common themes that kept coming up again and again around how we can amplify the voice of teachers, how a focus on teacher agency can really help us to drive forward an agenda on inclusion and equity. And I heard also across a lot of the sessions around the importance of assessment and supporting teachers on assessment to really assess what matters and to be able to understand the diverse learning needs of their students. I'm joined here by my colleague Aziza, who is the assessment coordinator for Aga Khan Foundation in Tajikistan. So welcome, Aziza.
Thank you.
I'd love to know, what were some of your highlights from the program yesterday?
Thank you very much, Bronwyn. First of all, I'd like to thank all the people who organized this event. It was amazing yesterday. And we, Tajikistan team, are very privileged to be part of this global experience. I enjoyed yesterday's panel discussion. It was very rich in content and touched upon very important elements related to early childhood development in various contexts, from global perspective, as well as some contextual country-specific challenges and opportunities for improvement, especially through School 2030 teaching innovations. Some of these elements are relevant for our context in Tajikistan, and if we apply this experience, it would bring positive changes in our work in pre-primary cohort as well. Thank you very much.
Thanks so much, Aziza. So I'd love for everybody to have a chance to just reflect a little bit on some of their highlights, maybe some key learning or some key takeaways that came from your involvement yesterday. So if we could just take maybe 2 minutes and turn to the person you're sitting next to and share one of your highlights or one of your favorite moments yesterday, and to exchange and to learn from others as well. Just 2 minutes to have a little, a meet and greet, pair and share. Did you go to any of the challenge sessions yesterday?
Yes, it was this formative assessments.
Oh, how was that with Education International? Yes. The learning circles, that one?
Yes.
Was it good?
It was good, yes. Yeah, they presented about this formative assessment around the world, and we had some discussion around this.
Great. And did you go to a second one, or did you just go to one? Yeah. That's fine. I think for a lot of the internal team, they don't get a chance. I'll just give them like. All right, everybody, just thanks, everybody. Just maybe wrap up next 10 or 20 seconds and we'll come back to the room together. Okay, thank you, everybody, so much. I'm sure you could keep chatting and sharing all morning, but we have many exciting things for you. So let's bring our attention back to the front of the room for a moment. So thanks very much. I hope you had a good chance to connect maybe with somebody you haven't met before. I feel like the mic is very loud, so I apologize. Maybe I need to take a step back. So one of the other things that I think is really exciting at the Global Forum yesterday, and also, you know, in the forum we had last year in Tanzania, and of course today and tomorrow as well, is the opportunity to connect different stakeholders from the school up to the system level. And it's a very exciting opportunity for us to learn what lessons are happening that we can draw from all of these different contexts, and how does that inform our work in all of the different ways and sectors in which we're working. And actually, although we have these big global events as an opportunity to come together globally, we have these events in Schools 2030 happening in our countries as well. And I didn't know if everybody was aware of that, but we have these same, very similar style national showcase events happening across every country at least once a year, to give an opportunity for teachers in that country to come together with national level policymakers and other key stakeholders at the country level to learn what the teachers are doing, to share best practices, to share assessment tools and design methodologies. So it's very, very exciting. And I'm thrilled to have Aziza here, in fact, because just last week they had a big national showcase in Tajikistan. I don't know how they managed to organize a national showcase and then pack up and fly to Porto for a global showcase, but they're an incredible team. Oh, wow. Hear it for the bird. Even the pigeons are impressed. So I just wanted to invite Aziza to give some reflections, because at the global level, we don't always get to see those key country level connections that are being made. And we know, of course, in education, it's very much a country level. Really, it's a national systems level that is where we'll see the most impact and change. So I'd love to just invite Aziza to share some of her reflections on the National Showcase event that was just held in Tajikistan. Over to you, Aziza.
Thank you. We are like on 30 and 31st of May, AKF Initiative School 2030 in Tajikistan, in close collaboration with the Ministry of Education and Science of the Republic of Tajikistan, organized a national forum called Innovative Teacher. This showcase served as a platform for the teachers from all regions of Tajikistan to present their innovative pedagogical projects. On the first day of this forum, 28 teachers from 4 regions presented their innovative design pedagogical solutions for the assessment for the evaluation committee. On the second day, the award ceremony presided over by the Deputy Minister of Education and Science of Tajikistan, Deputy Governor of Khatlon region, Head of Regional Education Departments, with participation of other relevant stakeholders, including over 700 teachers. Such recognition and policy dialogue, it's a very, let's say for us, we were happy to conduct this in our country because it indicates successful policy dialogue at national level. And it's one of the biggest indicators of the positive relationship at national level. So such recognition would have not happened without support of School 2030 global team and coalition of partners. So thank you very much for your continuous support in creating this positive change at all levels.
Thanks, thank you so much, Aziza. And it's great to see some of the imagery as well that came out from that event in Tajikistan. And again, just my incredible gratitude for the team for managing such a massive event and then flying to Porto to do it all over again here. So thank you so much. Now it's time for us to shift our focus towards today's program. And again, our theme, of course, is around inclusivity, equity, and pluralism. But today we're going to focus in our morning panels on the formal education system, on primary and secondary schools, and how we're strengthening public state schools to be as inclusive, equitable, and pluralistic as possible. I am absolutely delighted to welcome up a really strong panel of speakers to the stage, and chaired by the wonderful Baela Jamil. So please may I invite them up. As they're coming up, I just want to note to everybody, if you have not got your translation, please do bring it out, as we have a multilingual panel here. We'll have a Russian speaker, will be translated into English. But remember as well, please, that all of the main sessions are translated English, Russian, and Portuguese. Okay, so if you haven't gotten your headset, please do go and get it now as our panel comes to the stage. you have your microphone? Yeah. No, it's on. They'll make it fun. So you can all just sit. Nobody has to be at the podium. Thanks, Heather. Thank you so much, my dears.
Good morning, everyone. It's absolutely my pleasure and delight to welcome such an illustrious panel here. We've been hearing yesterday was magical. And if I can't stop my heart from saying Porto Zindabad, which means long live Porto, I should start also by saying Schools 2030 Zindabad. So yesterday there were really powerful conversations all day in the plenaries and indeed the workshops. And we looked at what Bronwyn said from schools to system level shifts, which addressed the issue of inclusivity, equitable and pluralistic learning through our schooling system across. And that is the essence of Schools 2030 ambitions. We are fortunate to be informed by a very wonderful set of advocates for the topic, which range from policymakers to teachers, researchers, and funders indeed. Schools 2030, for all of us by now, and we are embedded in that key message, is an ambitious global program that really seeks to bring agency of the child and the teacher front and center within the education systems from early years to secondary level in diverse pluralistic settings, and I must say informed by evidence iteratively again and again. It spans the academic and non-academic, holistic and inclusive learning, and it has been very inspiring to hear ministers as activists really yesterday, and I hope today as well, at the policy level, the passionate teachers in the classrooms, the researchers building rich, informed evidence for iterative action and participatory research, which is planned to go across this decade, and funders with faith in solid investment. I thought funders would fall off their seats. They had so much passion yesterday as we ended that magical day yesterday. So the possibility is being explored collectively. And we are privileged this morning, as I said, to be speaking with such a diverse group of panelists that we have here. But quickly, to introduce my panelists for the morning, we are very fortunate to have the Honorable Deputy Minister, Ms. Toktobubu Ashymbaeva, as a Deputy Minister of Education and Science in the Kyrgyz Republic, where she's responsible for managing education policies, innovations and programs. She has dedicated her career to advancing education with a particular focus on improving access to quality education for all students. Ms. Ashymbaeva has held various leadership positions in the education sector and has made significant contributions to the development of education system in Kyrgyzstan. We have then MacPherson with over 2 decades of experience in education and development. He's been with the Global Partnership for Education since 2015, where he leads their very famous Knowledge and Innovation Exchange, the KICS program. And formerly, he was working with Open Societies Foundation, and I had the privilege of working with him very closely, as well as several INGOs. His interest is in governance and politics of knowledge. Ian holds a DPhil in Education Studies from Oxford and multiple master's programs. We are also fortunate today to have with us Maina WaGĩokõ, who has also studied in Pakistan, so there is a real symbiotic linkage here as well. He's head of the Professional Development Capacity Center at the Aga Khan Schools Academy in Mombasa. Welcome, Maina. Heather Graham has joined the Oak Foundation as the director of the Learning Differences program in December 2017. The program envisions a world in which schools unlock the creativity and power of every young person and equip each one to shape more just and equitable communities. We couldn't have a better person from the funders' perspective than Heather here, as she spent over 2 decades working in education philanthropy and non-profit sectors. Welcome, Heather. And of course, last but not least, when we asked the municipality of Porto to recommend an educator, we were very fortunate to have with us Ilídia Cabral. She is from she's a professor of education and psychology at the university, at the Portuguese Catholic University here in Porto. Welcome to the panel. We'll begin the panel, and I hope we'll have 3 rapid rounds to the panel, but we want to begin immediately with the Honorable Deputy Minister. Ma'am, I wanted to ask you a question. Inclusive education is a policy priority in the Kyrgyz Republic. What are some of the challenges and priorities your government is facing in this area? And I hope everybody has a translator set with them. This is going to be in Russian. Over to you. And we've got about 4 minutes.
Ага, понятно. Доброе утро, уважаемые участники глобального форума.
Good morning, dear participants of the Global Forum. I'm so pleased to be here to attend this very important, significant event for the education sector domain, and it's my honor to speak during this discussion, and I'm grateful to the organizers that you've made it possible for us, that you've created this platform so that we could discuss some aspects so important for the education system: inclusive education, access to education for our children, starting from preschool education and proceeding with higher university education. And of course, as well as in all the other countries, priorities are determined by the challenges that every country faces. And I would like to focus on 4 key priorities for Kyrgyz Republic that in our country we are trying to implement. First, in order to develop the inclusive policy and legislation, every country actually needs to develop and implement the policy that supports principles of inclusive education. First, that includes development of the legislative framework that would guarantee the right and opportunities for all students, no matter what their capacities or needs are in that sense. And in that part, Kyrgyzstan ratified the Convention on Rights of People with Disabilities. The respective domestic legislative acts have been adopted, and bylaws have been developed. The second, no less important priority is developing and improving school infrastructure and infrastructure of educational facilities to ensure access and to include students with various needs. Kyrgyz Republic, most of schools in the Republic were built in 1960s through 1990s in the USSR period, and thus the infrastructure is not fully relevant or friendly to ensure access to schools. However, after the Republic became independent, we started building new schools according to new standards so that children could have access to education, so that they could make use of that and have access to quality education. Number 3, an important aspect is training and supporting the faculty, teachers. We know that the key role in the education system is the educator, and we want to ensure proper training, support for teachers so that they could provide the efficient education for our students, for children with various educational needs. That may include professional development programs, various trainings, advice. This is actually about exchange of experience that makes it possible for us to disseminate best practices, to share best experiences so that other countries could probably use this experience as well. And the 4th important aspect for all stakeholders, for all key actors in the education sector is awareness and changing the attitude and the mindset of the society. Here, it is important to promote higher awareness raising, to make sure that the society understands principles of inclusive education and rights of students with various needs. This can be achieved by means of information awareness raising campaigns that make it possible for every parent, every member of the community and all other stakeholders, they can have access to those services. And also, we try to develop close cooperation of the Ministry of Education with mass media to involve the public, engage the public in the decision-making process. Because the Ministry of Education, us, when we develop our policy, we need to be ready, we need to be open to the society, to parents, to make the respective decisions. And it is very important to know opinion of parents and experts in the field of education. And also we want to hear some criticism because, of course, in any country, we have this category of experts who are ready to come up with some constructive criticism to improve the system. And we need to be open to that to make sure that we make the decisions. Thank you.
Lays down the framework. Is that an echo? Yes. It lays down the framework so well for our discussion this morning. And I want to quickly move on to Ian from GPE. So Ian, what is the role of GPE in supporting ministries like in Kyrgyz Republic to achieve the inclusive education goals?
Thank you, Baela, and good morning to you all. The Global Partnership for Education, or GPE, is a multi-stakeholder partnership that supports partner countries to develop their own pathway to transform their education systems by identifying key challenges, implementing priority reforms, and aligning all stakeholders to achieve results. Our board of directors is comprised of different constituencies representing first and foremost partner countries, as well as donors, multilateral organizations, civil society, teacher unions, foundations, and the private sector. So the first way that GPE supports ministries to achieve inclusive education goals is by ensuring that they are included and moreover drive decisions about GPE strategy, priorities, and how it operates. Secondly, leaving no one behind is part of GPE's mission, and fulfilling the rights to education is central to our strategy, GPE 2025. Which is aligned with and directly addresses SDG 4. Its main goal is to accelerate access, learning outcomes, and gender equality through equitable, inclusive, and resilient education systems that are fit for the 21st century. Regarding inclusion specifically, GPE supports partner countries to transform their schools so that they cater to all children in a safe and healthy environment free from discrimination, including those with disabilities. It provides guidance, support, and funding for interventions to include children with disabilities in countries' education systems, tools and guidelines for education sector analysis and planning, and support for improved data on disability. Partner countries also use GPE grants to train teachers in inclusive education and provide access to equipment and learning materials for children with disabilities, such as braille machines, eyeglasses, and hearing aids. Third, and consequently, achieving inclusive education goals, i.e., ensuring gender equality in and through education, and that minority groups and the most marginalized are supported through national education systems, is central to the current GPE operating model. GPE works with over 87 governments and their in-country partners brought together in what are known as local education groups, or LEGs colloquially, to develop partnership compacts that identify a core policy priority around which all partners coalesce. Central to developing partnership compacts are evidence-based considerations on how to ensure education systems address issues of inclusion. GPE provides a range of grants that support capacity building and implementation to address inclusive education goals. So let me use the Kyrgyz example as one illustration of GPE support. Since 2013, GPE has provided over $33.5 million in financing. The latest grant in 2021 seeks to increase access to preschool education for children from the most vulnerable households and improve their school readiness. One of its three components is to expand preschool coverage for underserved children by increasing access to quality early childhood education in poor rural areas. Another example is from the Gambia, where the government is using their GPE grant to support mainstreaming children with mild to moderate disabilities, including blind students into the public school system. Those with other and more severe impairments will be sent to special schools, which are being strengthened to fulfill a secondary role as outreach centers to support staff in mainstream schools and provide functional resource centers in each region. A further way that GPE supports ministries achieve inclusive education goals is through the GPE Knowledge and Innovation Exchange, or KICS. KICS both funds research and creates spaces for knowledge sharing among and between country stakeholders, facilitated by 4 regional hubs, to enhance their education systems using relevant evidence and actionable research. The Kyrgyz Republic, to use the example once again, is part of the KICS Europe, Asia and Pacific Hub. A national KICS coordinator from the Ministry of Education and Science is the main liaison between the hub and the National KICS Steering Committee, which is comprised of 2 members from the Ministry of Education and Science, including the Honorable Deputy Minister, the Kyrgyz Academy of Education, the World Bank and UNICEF. In the 2.5 years since engaging with the hub, policy stakeholders and experts from the Kyrgyz Republic have engaged in various activities, including what are referred to as learning cycles. These are 5-week immersive professional development journeys supported by the hub, where national experts produce case studies through empirical research and analysis. Kyrgyz national experts have engaged in 4 learning cycles on scaling innovations, improving equitable access to education using geospatial data, diagnostic tools for improving education policy planning, and scaling teacher professional development. Each of these engagements has produced a case study and new primary research. And additionally, the Kyrgyz Republic has assumed a leadership position in a research consortium of 5 public associations from the Kyrgyz Republic, Georgia, Moldova, Uzbekistan, and Tajikistan, who plan to conduct a cross-country exchange on successful practices for access to education for children with disabilities. And supported by the Hub, activities will run from July to October of this year.
Thank you very much, and rarely would have such a perfect alignment between what the Honourable Minister has, the ambition, and what GP is doing. But let's go quickly down to the grassroots, to the school level, and ask Maina this question on how can we support teachers to make inclusive education policy translate into classroom practice, and how do you really negotiate culture and context into inclusive classrooms? Over to you, Maina, and we are short of time, but we want to at least give you a good 4 minutes for your opening.
Thank you very much for the opportunity. And it's always good to give voice to the teachers because they have realities on the ground. So you heard from the policymaker that there is a legislation and there is a policy on inclusion. The challenge is, how does it trickle down to the teacher in the classroom? Because they need to access this information and know this is a policy, this is how we are supposed to do it. So the first thing is to appreciate that the teachers are made aware that there is such a policy. So in teacher preparation program, in teacher in-service program, all training, there should be an aspect of inclusivity. We cannot address inclusivity as a stand-alone. It needs to be integrated alongside other. We don't spice it. It has to be part and parcel of the way we prepare learners and teachers. Secondly, what we value, we measure, and what we measure, we value. Therefore, people who appraise teacher or support teachers or recognize teachers should be able to have an aspect of inclusion in part of their parameters to measure the success of a teacher. So any person who is recognized in education must have that aspect of inclusivity as part of a right of what they do. Then we also have teacher mentors who ensure continuity, support of teachers on the ground. Therefore, they have a responsibility to ensure that inclusivity is part and parcel of what we do. But when you say, how do we ensure that this happens in the classroom? We need to work with the teachers so that they understand what is pluralism. Just 3 weeks ago, I was preparing teachers, and when I used the word pluralism, they wondered, what is this word about? So we need to use a language, not from academia, a language of the teachers where they understand activities in the classrooms which bring out inclusivity. And there are simple things like differentiation. The moment you bring differentiation, because most of us, we don't look at the continuum, we stay on the periphery. We look at extreme disabilities, yet everybody is unique. And everybody is able differently. So how do we accommodate all the 30 learners in the class? Because when I hear a teacher saying, I'm teaching grade 3, I get worried. They should say, I'm teaching the 25 learners in grade 3. Because grade 3 is not a unit, but is made of individuals learner in that class. So there is an issue of language in the class, the issue of the resources you use, are they gender blind or are they inclusive? The issue of the group work, because you don't start inclusivity up there, you start by cooperation in class. Then there is the issue of the way you question, the way you give time to girls and boys in the classroom. And then we also have to consider the issue of universal design of learning. Because the moment you bring universal design of learning in the class, you are appreciating multiple perspective. You are appreciating multiple representation of information. And therefore, you are considering each and every learner in the class with their learning variability, with the way they learn, the way they access concept. And we call that affordance. How do you create affordance to this poor child, to this child of a single parent, to this child who's walking? Everybody has a unique way of learning. So inclusivity will only work if educators embrace open-mindedness. Because the moment you have open-mindedness, you are going to appreciate diversity, and therefore you are going to appreciate Learners with their individual differences, and therefore you'll be flexible, you'll accommodate, and you'll bring all on board.
Thank you very much. Spoken like someone in the classroom. And we come to Heather now. We've heard from the classroom, we've heard from the policymakers, we've heard from the donor. And in terms of a philanthropic organization, what is the role of donors in supporting both school and system level change?
Yes, thank you. And thank you for the opportunity to be here today. I want to pick up on some of the themes that were raised yesterday in the conversation with the other donors. We heard from Dubai Cares and Lego and Jacobs about the important role that philanthropy plays in terms of seeding innovation and taking risks. And at Oak Foundation, we really see that as a pivotal role that we can play in this work. We're really about promoting and fostering partnerships that seed and support the innovation and those risks. And I'm just going to give you a little bit of context about our work at Oak Foundation, which then situates it in the context of why we're here and why we're supporting Schools 2030. So at Oak, our work is really in support of three primary areas of focus to support students with learning differences. We're focused on the research, so understanding what works in classrooms, what works to help students realize their potential as learners, and then translating those practices, the knowledge into the practices that teachers and school leaders take into schools, and then finally creating the enabling conditions that support the environment for students to succeed. And I think we've heard about all three of those levels throughout this conference. And the problem that we're trying to solve, which Simon talked about yesterday on the panel, is really that schools are not designed or set up to meet the needs of all learners. They have a very narrow model and they don't address the variability in learners. And so we're very focused, we're focused on solving that problem at Oak Foundation, and particularly solving that problem with a focus on the 1 in 5 students who have learning and thinking differences. So in our work, we very specifically look at students with learning and thinking differences such as dyslexia, dysgraphia, dyscalculia, ADHD. We recognize that many of our partners have a broader view of inclusivity in education, which we fully embrace and support. And for us, the lens is very focused on those specific learning differences, and then also bringing in a focus on educational equity. So thinking about students who are not thriving in schools, and why are they not thriving? So it's the learning differences, and they're the systemic barriers that many students face, such as poverty, such as racism. Girls' education is a gender discrimination. There are many, many challenges. And so we're really looking at the Venn diagram of where the marginalization for students with learning differences is further exacerbated. And we see our role as a funder as really pushing systems to design for the students who are the most at the margins, with the belief that if schools support the students who are most at the margins, then all students will actually be better supported. Later, I'll give you some examples of what that looks like in our work in literacy. We heard a little bit about universal design for learning, and we have one of our partners here that's working with CAST and the founders of UDL. I think that's a really great example of how the premise of UDL works for all students, and it particularly works for students with learning differences. So if you think about really enhancing the ways that students can show what they know, not just through a test that assesses one dimension, but really giving them many opportunities to show what they know, many opportunities to learn through different approaches. Those are great examples of things that work for students with learning differences, but really work to enhance the work for all students and students with learning differences. And then finally, I just want to say, in terms of the work with Schools 2030, we think this initiative is a wonderful example for us of the work that's happening at those three levels. So thinking about the research into what works for students, and in this case, getting the research that's coming up from the teachers, that is not going down, which so often we see that the research is coming from people who have actually very little experience in classrooms, and then the translation of that research into the practice, and then creating the enabling conditions, such as a forum like this, where we're together and we're really thinking about the broader systems and how they all connect.
Thank you very much. That's so succinctly put. So as we work for students at the margins and what works, we need to be informed by research. And we have with us Professor Ilídia. And so what is research on education inclusion and equity telling us? That would be a very important question for the audience also, looking at what Porto is doing.
Thank you so much, Baela, and good morning to all of you. It's a pleasure to be here. So first of all, I would like to clarify that academia is now focusing on a broader concept of educational inclusion. This has been evolving over the past few years. We are not looking at educational inclusion only as the inclusion of students with disabilities or of minorities anymore. When we talk about educational inclusion, we are actually talking about providing quality education to all students, regardless of their background, abilities, or characteristics. So it's about creating the conditions for every student to achieve academic success. With that being said, what research has been telling us is that, first of all, although the achievement gap, which refers to disparities in academic performance among different groups of students, has shown some improvements in certain areas and for specific groups, the fact is that persistent disparities still exist, particularly related to socioeconomic status and race or ethnicity. Secondly, these disparities are mainly due to a standardized and uniform school model that tends to give the same curriculum to everyone in the same way and at the same time, regardless of different characteristics of students, using the same assessment tools for everyone. In the third place, the main victims of exclusion at schools are the ones who do not fit the mainstream school model, because in general, schools are still expecting children to adapt to its model instead of trying to adapt to different backgrounds and learning styles. So it's the one-fits-all model. And at the same time, inclusive education has been shown to enhance academic outcomes, promote social integration, and foster positive attitudes towards diversity. So these findings have been influencing international policy, which is great, by fostering school autonomy through legislation that allows and invites and fosters schools to rethink the way they organize themselves in order to make every child learn as much as they can. And this involves, obviously, assuming more diverse, plural, personalized, and integrated organizational and pedagogical models at schools. And in Portugal, for example, recent legislation is fostering school autonomy to reinvent its organizational and pedagogical models with the program called Autonomy and Curriculum Flexibility Program. So I would say these are the main highlights.
Thank you very much. And I think it resonates so well with what we heard the Honorable Minister speak yesterday. I mean, so much passion on inclusion and diversity. It was really inspiring. But I think at this point, we finished the first round and we want to we are conscious of time, finish exactly at 10:10. But it'll be great to start this round with Maina and to find out, okay, we've heard the school level, the policy level discussion. Well, what really is that ecosystem all about? What's happening there? What kind of support is needing? Who else is there in that system? So we would love to be informed by you and what you are doing in Mombasa.
Thank you very much. Schools do not exist on their own. They exist within a community. And therefore, the parents who bring the children to the school are key stakeholders, and they play a critical role in the lives of the children. And they come with their uniqueness, their baggage, their cultural aspiration, and where they come from. Cultural belief sometimes excavate or increase elements of exclusivity. So we need to be sensitive in the way we are negotiating, trying to empower everybody from somebody who's coming to a community where they are not empowered at all. So cognizant of the aspects of the community as they engage in the school is very, very important. So as the teachers are bringing issues of inclusivity, there is communication to the parents in two ways. Parents can be invited into the school to see, for example, how the girl child is empowered and is presenting as a school president. That is a clear example that this girl can speak, yet at home she's not supposed to speak. So that example can give them a possibility, evidence, way to see it works. The other way is having place-based learning, whereby the students can go to the marketplace and do an activity. And the community can observe the dynamic of the presentation and the empowerment across genders and the resources. And that vivid example can influence the community to see how empowerment is transcending across all genders, across all classes, without borders. So it's very, very important that messaging, not limited to schools, but it involves the stakeholders around so that they can see this huge shift, because sometimes it's a very, very difference. By the time you were 18 years, you had spent 86% of your life at home. Meaning that the home environment has a lot of influence on your thinking and on your action. So as much as the school is trying to infuse a different way of thinking, an empowered, more open-minded, more inclusive, we also need to be cognizant of the other end, which can dampen our effort, and therefore we have collaborative effort for all.
Thank you.
So bottom line is, if we appreciate that we are all humans, that is a way to bridge diversity and embrace everybody positively.
Thank you very much, Maina. And again, this whole notion, how do you open the school walls? How do you make them more inclusive? How do you blur the boundaries between school and the other systems outside? And over to our Honorable Deputy Minister in Kyrgyz Republic, you've been trying to create new roles for exactly bridging those gaps and become a part of that ecosystem. So in your education systems, what kind of support are you addressing, through whom, for curriculum and pedagogical development? Can you speak about that initiative that you have in the Kyrgyz Republic? Of the social pedagogues and other initiatives that you've created?
Спасибо. Прежде я хочу поблагодарить Яна за то, что...
First of all, I would like to thank Jan for assisting our initiatives. GPE has supported us greatly in this respect. Before I start answering the question about the mechanisms, I would like to thank Maina. He said what a teacher should do. The ministry deals with the policy development. It drafts the laws, and thus it provides teachers with opportunities to implement the policies. So the teachers should be very creative. Their creativity plays a crucial role. And here I would like to say, if we look at the statistics of Kyrgyz Republic, we will find out that 1.5 million students in our system are aged from 6 to 18, and 24% of them are children with some disabilities. We need inclusive classes for these children and even inclusive schools. What is implied by an inclusive school or inclusive classroom? The child is entitled to high-quality education. The child has to get access to the textbooks, to materials. The child should have barrier-free access to such educational environment, regardless of the child's peculiarities of needs. All children should get equal opportunities to receive high-quality education. In this connection, we've started implementing some pilot projects for the time being. First, 20 schools, then 56 schools implemented such a position as teacher assistant. So children with disabilities may get inclusive education there. Here we do not imply migrants or minorities. We focus solely on children with some mental health disabilities. They do need a tutor who would accompany this child and provide the required assistance. Unfortunately, we cannot launch such a position of a tutor in each and every school. However, we have started the process. Since 2012, we've launched also a position of a social teacher who is involved in arranging social events and bringing up children on the basis of partnership forged between school and family, school and community, because a child is never isolated. Child is always living in the environment, so this inclusive culture should be in place. The school has to come up with the inclusive classrooms and the materials. However, unless the community is open for this inclusive culture, we won't achieve any difference. It's incredibly important to engage the entire society. Everyone should be involved in the process. We realize that there are many different ways and solutions for children to ensure high-quality education for them, regardless of their capacities and peculiarities. However, in spite of some of our achievements, we still recognize some challenges ahead of us. We are looking at the horizon of 2030, so we have to question ourselves, what efforts should we invest to create more inclusive schools, to achieve more equity and pluralism in the school system? These are the questions we are currently working on. Looking behind, we can proudly state that our progress in terms of inclusiveness is the result of people's changing mentality. So people have changed their ways, have changed their attitudes to the inclusiveness. Education is not a privilege, but a fundamental right of every individual. And we started recognizing that. So the mindset, the way of thinking of many people have changed. We've progressed also in terms of eliminating barriers towards the education. We ensure that every child, regardless of the race or ethnicity, has access to high-quality education. However, we should not stay idle. We should invest in technologies and digital literacy to avoid these performance gaps. We also have to provide targeted support to low-income communities, rural vicinities, and some dotational regions that need these dotations, these subsidies. This is the equal distribution of resources. We also have to focus, we as state have to focus more on broader reach out. We have to encompass both preschool and secondary school education. To achieve these goals, just like my colleagues have mentioned before, we need to cooperate, we need to partner, and we have to collaborate. Both the government, the civil society, the teachers' community, all together we can exchange experience, opinions, and learn from each other. Thank you.
The Honourable Minister, has an eye on implementation inside the classrooms, so from laws to infrastructure access to capacity building of teachers to awareness, and then to action and research, but also innovations. And we've seen that without that, ministers have to have an eye on that, and of course partnerships. I think we probably have this as our last round, and I'd like to quickly move to Heather in terms of, again, what is the role of donors in supporting both school level and system level change? And we've seen the kind of aspirations and the kind of activities that are already happening in countries.
Great, thank you so much for the question. I want to go back to a point that Maina made about students don't exist in a vacuum, and students exist within this broader context. And so I think it's really important in our work, in philanthropy in particular, but in the broader sector as well, that we address the challenges from multiple dimensions. So I want to just focus on a specific example succinctly for my final remarks here. We have identified early literacy as a major challenge that we're trying to solve in our work. So students being unprepared and not taught to read, using evidence-based approaches to reading. We know that that is the best way to ensure a strong foundation in reading, and yet it is not happening in so many contexts. So we recognize that there need to be multiple approaches to addressing this problem. For us, that has meant that we have focused on creating understanding and awareness of the problem. So we have done a campaign supporting journalism to elevate the challenge. We have had a very successful partnership with APM, American Public Media, and Emily Hanford in the US on elevating how is it that students with dyslexia and students overall in the US context in particular are not being taught to read using the evidence-based approach. Now that's spreading globally as well. And we're really, with that work, creating a sense of outrage about what this injustice is and how it's impacting students. And then we're supporting transparency using data about what does this actually look like. So as one of the panelists said earlier, if you don't measure it, it doesn't get addressed. And so in the context of reading, we're supporting the National Center for Teaching Quality, NCTQ, to look at how are schools of education, are they teaching the best practices with regard to reading? If not, why not? What does that look like? Putting that information out into the world. And in the context of our work in the US, we are seeing a lot of shifts in state and local policies around teaching reading. And then the third and potentially, I think, most important and pivotal piece of this is that we're building the capacity of teachers and school leaders to know how to use that evidence-based approach in classrooms. And we're doing that in the US, and we're also doing that in a global context. So I'll just name 3 of our partners that are working on that. We are supporting the work of the Luminos Fund, who is here. They spoke, I believe, yesterday. We're supporting their work in Ghana on this. We're supporting the work of Teach for All to work globally with their networks of teachers on helping ensure that teachers understand how to adopt their practices to support the diverse needs of learners. And then we're supporting the Trevor Noah Foundation in South Africa with their work to build the capacity of educators and to ensure that students are equipped to really be successful.
Thank you very much, Heather. It shows that when funders are informed, they walk the talk, and they are looking at the whole area so sensitively. Quickly going to Professor Ilídia once again. At an organizational level, how can schools respond efficiently to the growing social and cultural diversity of students? We've got, sadly, just 2.5 minutes, and then we have Ian finally.
Well, David Tiak and William Tobin, back to 1994, have introduced a very interesting metaphor, which is the grammar of schooling. This means the grammar of schooling, the organizational and pedagogical forms of schooling that have persisted over the years, shaping the structure of teaching and learning in much the same way grammar shapes language. They also studied and explained that it has been so hard to change this grammar of schooling because there is a common consensus about what a real school is. So students, teachers, and society in general are completely familiarized with the traditional school model that divides everything into different drawers. So it divides students into groups according to their age, it divides knowledge into subjects, it divides learning into specific times and places that are the same for everyone, regardless of their differences. And in this concept of school, that is still the prevailing, this is the concept of school which is still the prevailing model, I mean. So students who don't learn in this model, they fail. And so retention is still the most common way to deal with the fact that students don't learn. So if they don't learn, it's their problem. It's never considered as a problem from the organization, from people working there, from the conditions. So, however, the growing social and cultural diversity of students is making it very clear that we must move towards a student-centered learning model, which implies abandoning the one-fits-all model of education and investing on much more personalized teaching and learning models. This is about reinventing the grammar of schooling, which implies, very briefly, for example, making times and spaces for learning flexible, giving to each student according to their needs, making teaching and learning a shared responsibility, team teaching, fostering an interactive professionalism, cooperative learning, valuing students' prior knowledge and idiosyncrasies and articulating them with the national curricula, investing in systematic and continuous formative assessment practices, adopting more integrated curriculum management practices, adopting active teaching and learning methodologies, project-based learning, flipped classroom, and other methodologies, and making schools, this is really very important, professional learning communities where teachers continuously share their practices, reflect upon them, and refine them in order to optimize the teaching and learning process. And all of this with a leadership focused on learning, the learning of everyone in schools, not only of students, but mostly of teachers. This is it.
I'm sure everyone in this room has, this has resonated with all of you. These shifts are what we are all about. And Ian, finally to you, from a global governance perspective, how do you support and strengthen these meso-level structures, the kind of shifts we are talking about in the education systems, this global partnership for education? How does it look at these alliances?
Thank you, Baela. And I'll cut my comments because I know that we're running short of time. I just want to talk about two initiatives that the GPE supports that support these meso-level structures. One is through a program called Education Out Loud, or EOL. EOL supports civil society advocacy and social accountability, which are integral parts to the vision of GPE 2025 and ingrained in the principle of mutual accountability, and stakeholder participation, which is a key factor for evidence-based systems change and transformation rooted in the realities of children, of teachers, of schools and communities. And EOL enables civil society to broaden bases, to be more inclusive of marginalized and local groups, to increase the capacity and the strategic influence in education policy processes, and improve data and evidence gathering to monitor commitments, policies, and plans. And to give just one example from Tanzania, the National Education Coalition, TENMET, supported by EOL, used research that they had conducted on the state of girls' education to advocate with the local education group, policymakers and government officials for a re-entry policy for teen mothers. For the past years, Tanzania mainland did not allow students who dropped out due to pregnancy to be re-enrolled back into formal schooling. But in November of 2021, Tanzania adopted Circular 2, allowing teenage mothers to resume formal schooling after giving birth. So EOL is currently active in more than 60 countries with 80 grants supporting national education coalitions, national accountability organizations, and transnational networks. And a further way that GPE supports meso-level structures is through KICS. I mentioned earlier how the KICS Hub creates spaces for countries to engage in learning and exchange activities. But in addition to the hubs, the KICS research portfolio is comprised of 41 applied research grants implemented in 53 countries by over 100 non-government organizations, 70% of which are based in the Global South. Many of these projects engaged and are implemented by these meso-level institutions, and I'll just give one example. The Back to School project is led by the Graça Machel Trust in collaboration with the Africa Child Policy Forum in Ethiopia, the Diocese of Musoma in Tanzania, and the Pan-African Research Services in Kenya. And their project works with teachers, with learners, with parents, with communities and policymakers to increase the enrollment of out-of-school girls in accelerated learning programs in the 3 countries, as well as their retention and transition. My final point, Baela, I can see you looking at me. My last point is that, worth noting, is that KICS is launching 4 new calls for proposals this year. One is open now on data systems and data use, which includes 3 streams. First, expanding and integrating data sets to understand learning and promote gender equality, equity, and inclusion. Secondly, using platforms and tools to enhance data use. And thirdly, expanding uses and users of data, including for public accountability. Further calls will address specifically gender equality, equity, and inclusion, which will drop this month, and teacher professional development and early childhood care and education late this year.
Thank you very much. This has been an amazing session, but just to again highlight, just so that, our language shifts are also in place. When you look at academic outcomes, please let's keep a focus on non-academic outcomes as well. For Schools 2030, they go hand in hand. And I can't forget what yesterday was a great highlight when, we're saying today, and I'm just thinking of from my teenage years as a student to now, to look at the big shifts. Today, we talk about equality as access and equity as inclusive quality. Now, that's a big shift. And I think you had absolutely rock stars here as panelists to talk about it, because they are not just speaking about things that they will happen, they're really walking the talk. A big round of applause to all of them. We come to the end of the session now. Thank you very much for being such a great audience.